Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on tips and tricks for modeling faster in Revit. Once again, welcome to everybody. We're just waiting for a few more people, and just to make a note, this will be recorded. And I would love to take any questions that people have at the end of the webinar. Feel free to jot them in the question box, and then we will get to those at the end of this session. So this is Brianna Ladd. I'm an application engineer here at CTC. And I'm excited to share with you today some tips and tricks to help you model faster. So these are some tips and tricks that will be beneficial to the daily user of Revit, allowing you to do things more efficiently and effectively. So perhaps there's been a time or two where you've thought to yourself, if I could do this fill in the blank thing that I have done X amount of times faster, it would make me X amount more productive. So over the course of the next 20-30 minutes here, we'll give you some answers along that track. So if we can save one another some picks and clicks along the way, who wouldn't benefit from that, right? We all would. So without further ado, we'll jump right into Revit. And I've just got a architectural template here. I did throw in a couple of items here, but there's nothing really canned about this project that we're looking at whatsoever. And for starters, I'd just like to say that Revit gave us many of these tips and tricks that are already built in. So let's use them. So, and let's learn them. So first of all, if you go up to the File function in 2018, it's now the File rather than the big R, and go down to your Options, and in the User Interface, you have keyboard shortcuts. This is, out of the box, a lot of these are set, but it also has the ability for you to customize them to your liking. So if you come in here and you say, for instance, some of the items or commands that you use frequently, like for instance a detail line. Just learning that the shortcut for that detail line is DL, rather than having to, as you get acquainted with the Revit user interface and the tabs and what is on each tab and panel, hitting a couple of keystrokes is a lot faster than going through multiple tabs. So if they're not already assigned, you can go ahead and give it a keystroke to assign to it. It also allows you to do duplicates. So in the case that this keyboard shortcut is already assigned to something else, I can simply use the arrow keys to cycle through the matches. So again, rather than maybe a couple extra clicks to cycle through, maybe I only assign, one or two commands that have multiple keyboard shortcuts so that I'm not constantly having to filter through with my arrow key as well. But definitely something to get acquainted with, your keyboard shortcuts, and utilize them, absolutely. Another one from within this options file is the double click options. So you can customize the double click settings right in here. Out of the box, again, nice to know, and come in here and take a look and understand which elements within your project have the ability to be editable just by simply double clicking. There's family. If you double click on any family within the project, it'll take you right into the edit family environment. A sketched element such as a ceiling or a floor or other elements like that within the project, by double clicking on it, it'll bring you into the sketch mode to make any modifications that you might need. Activating the view with views that are placed on sheets. Again, a nice little trick to know to just double click on that view to activate it and make any sort of changes live into your project. So several things to just kind of note to yourself to look at in here. Familiarize yourself with, and if it saves, again, a bit of navigation for now down the road, then that's a win in my book. So another one that's built into Revit is this ribbon right here, the quick access toolbar. So again, just the drop down here to customize this how we want to will save us a lot of time, so that we again don't have to go from tab to tab. The commonly used commands can be right here on this quick access bar. I also have the ability to order them however I'd like. So if I want this one to be first, I can order these however I would like. So take note of that. Another thing when placing items, after I've placed items, so if I go here and just place a couple of these items in my project, by selecting it and holding Ctrl and dragging, I can simply copy the item. So a little bit faster than just right-clicking copy or going up here to the copy function or keyboard shortcut of CO. If I add additional items to my selection by holding the Control, I notice the plus sign on my keyboard there, or my mouse, excuse me. I'm adding multiple items to my selection and holding the Control and dragging, and I can make multiple more copies that way. If I have a selection set, this will work for many items throughout your project, but let's just say I needed all of these trees that are on level 1 to be pasted in the same location up on level 2. So I can make the selection set, come up here to copy to my clipboard. I have those items copied to my clipboard, and then the paste from the clipboard, and I can assign to selected levels. Now when I select that, I have the option to say what levels I'd like those items to be pasted to. So in this case, I decided that I want that selection of trees to be placed in the same location on my level 2. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. If I go up to level 2, all that selection is in the same location. It placed it. So you'll notice here I have multiple windows open, and if I needed to go back, or if I wanted to cycle through to see what other views I had without using the drop down here, I can use another keyboard shortcut, Control-Tab, to cycle through my views. So just as much as cycling through forwards, maybe when I have a bunch of these views open, I don't want to have to cycle through 10 of those views every time. So I can do the Control-Shift-Tab to go backwards, which is kind of nice too, as opposed to going forwards and backwards, just a couple of them. Saves me a couple of cycles through that way. So placing components, if I grab this desk here and I want to place them, and I'm just going to arbitrarily place them along here, and don't have a very good eye for lining things up, but then I want to go through and I want to align these things to this wall, these desks to this wall. I want them to be in a straight line along this wall here. I can use the Align tool or keyboard shortcut of AL, select my item that I want items to align to, and then select my element, which is great. But every time I need to go to the next element, I need to select that element that I want it to align to first. So within this tool, the function Align and Lock, there is this ability to multiple alignment. So if I check box that, then I just have to select my element, and then I can continue on in a nice, easy, little bit faster, saving me a couple of clicks, ability to align all of these items right in a row, saving a click back and forth from the original align to element. Another checkbox that is sometimes missed is the select elements by face. So as you'll notice, when I'm hovering over this second level, I want to make a selection here. And with this up here under the modify, this select, it's kind of hard to, again, it gets missed a little bit, but there's a select and it's a drop down here. And under here, I have a checkbox that says select elements by face. If that's unchecked, we'll just see what it does. If that's unchecked, when I go here to select my floor, which is placed on this level within these walls here, I have to get really close to the edge of that in order to find my floor that I'm selecting. I'm watching my init Revit sort of command bar ribbon down here to find what elements I'm selecting. So there's my curtain wall, there's my curtain wall. It's hard to get, even when I tab through to select the elements, it's hard to actually grab my floor. But with this, if I drop down the checkbox here to select elements by face, I come over here and you'll notice as soon as my mouse hovers over that area, it's selecting in the pre-selection color of blue and giving my mouse the floor's generic floor selection mode. And then down here, you'll notice in my command bar, it's selecting the floor. So much easier to just grab and make selection of things with the select by face toolbox or checkbox checked. We'll go into a 3D view of this. We've got kind of a mess here going on, but in this in this 3D view where I've got this curtain wall here, I've got this curtain wall selected. By right-clicking, when I have that selected, I have multiple different options here. So to select mullions, if I wanted to make a change to them, I can select all of those vertical or all of the mullions on a vertical grid or on a horizontal grid or inner mullions or border mullions, and I can make changes to those. So if I went ahead and did that and I wanted to make all of those continuous, I can do that right here, or unpin them, I can do that. And I can do that in a kind of a more mass production fashion. So again, that was just selecting the item. In this case, it's the curtain wall. And right-clicking on that and finding my selections in more of a grouping. So over in my project browser on the right-hand side, by right-clicking on a view, I can have the ability to open the sheet directly from there, from which the view is placed on. So if I don't know exactly where my view is placed, I can simply, or which sheet, or I don't want to cycle through my sheets, I can go ahead and just right-click on the view and it'll bring me directly to that sheet. Placing objects, again, another tidbit for this, possibly that might be helpful for, in this case, if I needed to change the orientation of now all of these items. When I was placing them, I can use the option of spacebar to rotate them. That's on the actual placement of the item. So all I'm doing is hitting spacebar and it's rotating my element around while I'm placing it. If I now wanted to go ahead and rotate all of these items, With them in selection mode, I can also use my spacebar to rotate them. This guy was a wild one, I'm not sure. So on initial placement using the spacebar to rotate them, once they're placed, I can do a massive selection of rotating as well. This also works for surface patterns. So in the case that I might have a surface pattern of wood planking on my wood floor in my project, and somehow my floors didn't place all in the same planking direction, or a room next to another room didn't place in the same planking direction, but I would like them to, I can come in here, and this time it's similar to the spacebar function, but actually we're going to use rotate. So what I'm doing is hovering over this surface pattern. It's a filled region just on a drafting view in this case, but surface pattern in a floor plan in the case of a wood floor would work the same. So I'm going to tab through until I can grab one of those lines in my filled region so that one of them is selected, and grab my rotate tool up here. I'm going to start my rotation here, and I'm going to give it a 90, just keyboard in 90, and you'll notice that it changed. I'll do that one more time. So I'm starting, bringing my rotation 90 degrees, and my surface pattern rotates so that I can have all of my wood planking, in this case, in this example, in the same direction. Moving items or nudging items, you'll notice that I'm just selecting an item and moving it with my arrow key, and it's moving a little bit of a distance. I guess it's, you know, a couple of, maybe half a foot every once in a while. If I zoom in on my item, it's going to move those increments a little bit smaller. So in the case that I need to get a little bit smaller increment in moving, I just zoom into that item, and the nudging will be a little bit smaller and more precise. When you're moving something, when I have a selection on and I want to go ahead and move it, moving at a certain distance, I can go ahead and type in how far I want it to move. In this case, when I put in 20, Revit thinks, you know, I'm going to either specify feet or inches, but in this case, if I do a space bar, it's going to assume that that's feet, and then if I do a 6, it's going to then assume that it's 20 feet and 6 inches. So again, I can eliminate having to type in the feet symbol and the inches symbol because Revit's smart enough to know that. That's what I mean by putting in that space bar. You can have Revit do some of the math for you in more ways than that. So if you wanted to put in some sort of equation or formula for move this item 50 minus 30 feet, it will do that as well. So, let's see. Another tip for model performance is to use a presentation page or a splash screen for your Revit project to open up to. So I've created an example of a splash screen here, just in a drafting view. You would create something like this. You maybe bring in an image, maybe have some sort of direction of what to do in this project or things like that, but it will always be saving to this location and then opening up to this location as well. This is simply for performance enhancement. So when you're opening up your project, opening it up to a drafting view or a splash screen will allow your model to open much more efficiently and effectively, and probably in turn save you a little bit of time and frustration. So level 3. So I've got some walls here, and I want to put in my floor. Using the Pick Wall tool from my floor command allows me to pick the floor, or pick the walls, finish the sketch, And that way, if my walls move, my floors move with it. So notice how the edge of the floor didn't stay there when I moved my wall because I picked the walls, which is nice. That way, if there's a design change made, you don't have to remind yourself to go back, move the wall, and then go back, edit the floor. It just kind of is all done in one swoop. So in 2018, those of you who are in here already, maybe you've noticed this functionality already, the browser organization. So all I'm doing is right-clicking on the view in my project browser, and I'm selecting the browser organization. So here I have the ability to organize my project browser a little bit more. If I wanted to organize it by discipline here, for example, I can do that. So now notice that all of my plans thus far are under architectural, and then I've got my coordination discipline as well with my 3D views and my drafting views. So this is a nice feature to help organize it to your customization. Likewise, if you wanted to create your own organization, you can do that as well by selecting and creating a new one. A couple other things just for modeling. These are a little bit more just for the record tips as opposed to actually showing. As far as modeling and when to build a specific new type, so specifically building a wall type versus painting a material. So if you're going to change the structure of the wall, definitely editing and creating a new type of that wall is suggested, versus if you're just applying a different paint color to an existing wall, that would be a case where you could use something like the paint tool. But we want to definitely advise that when editing the structure or the building structure or the assembly of the wall with a different material other than a paint or wall covering or something like that, that you actually do edit the structure of the wall. So using section boxes during your design phase. To kind of make the area a little bit smaller if you're working on a specific area will again help with performance when making changes to those elements in that view. That way Revit doesn't have to work so hard when you're rotating and things to regenerate everything within the model. It's just basically working on those things that are within this confines. Likewise, using wireframe or shading modes when doing these sort of modifications or working with linked files allows for it to be faster as well. So just for the record again, many of these views, having them open just to kind of keep things clean. I know this is probably just a personal preference of a tip that I'm throwing in here, but closing those unnecessary windows, again, we gave the keyboard shortcuts for filtering through them or cycling through them, but just having those views open and closing out of those views that are unneeded is an easy and good practice too. And you can simply do that by closing out of, when you notice the red X there, you can close out of any other windows of the views that you're not working in. And if and when making any sort of significant changes to a model, such as level or major geometry, it is recommended to make the changes when no one else is in the model. Another tip in regards to arrays, when you're using arrays for copying and associating things, after that array has been deployed within the project, ungrouping them can help, again, increase the model performance. Related to family editing, creating a family component rather than a model in place is always recommended. Using model in place is really only recommended for those one-off specific, very custom situations. So in the example that it's a very customized front desk or something like that, then we advise to build a model in place. Otherwise, using family components, the building an actual family would be our recommendation. So other couple things when building families, remember to lock dimensions. That can help with kind of constraining things, and then constraining things, don't over constrain them because you will receive an error. And then within regards to material editing, always duplicate the asset when you're creating new materials so that this does not affect or change all the areas where that material is used, so that you can make specific changes to that particular material without affecting those that it came from. So, and lastly, we've got kind of a new workflow for corrupt files. That a little tip from us, our free family exporter tool. If you notice that a model is corrupt, running our family exporter tool on the project and dumping all of those families into a dump file on your desktop, it will export all those families, and when Revit gets stuck, you'll receive a report at the end of the export. You'll receive a report, and any of those families that it got stuck on are likely to be corrupted. So right then and there, you can go ahead, go back into your model, do some cleanup, eliminate those families, delete them out of your project, and hopefully eliminate the corruption in the model. So that is all I have. In conclusions, Revit once again has some built-in capacity to assist us with modeling faster. So just familiarize yourself with those areas and those keyboard shortcuts and things. And if you find a tip and trick that you learned, share it with others. It's always wonderful. I know even just in this preparation, I read, multiple different things from multiple different people that I didn't know. I found some things in just my research of this, which is fantastic. Thank you to those, for sharing those. And I just encourage all of us to do the same.